We all go through different chapters in our lives, some stranger than others. Welcome to Strange Chapters, where we bring you true stories of the strange, the macabre, the paranormal, and the supernatural. So sit back, relax, and let's get to this week's featured author and their stories. Welcome back to Strange Chapters. I'm your host and narrator, Eric Freeman Sims. Thanks for tuning in today. And if you haven't yet, please go rate, review, share, and subscribe the show to help more people find it. Today, we're bringing you 3 stories from Paige Stone's book, The Uninvited, a collection of true life, supernatural, and paranormal experiences. Paige Stone's books are available on Kindle, Amazon, and wherever fine books are sold. So if you're ready, let's sit back, relax, and get strange. Story 1, The Melting Walls. In my bedroom in the house in Portland, Oregon, one entire wall in my room was bookshelves. My mom and grandma were both avid readers and collectors of books, you might say. Before I was born, my room was a catch-all storage room for things that needed frequent or regular access to and didn't need to go in the basement. This also meant storage for her books and my grandma's books, who lived with us at the time. My room was pretty basic. It was the early 1980s. I had a bed, a nightstand with a lamp and an alarm clock, a radio in the corner, a few boxes, and a full wall of bookshelves. The bookshelves were directly opposite the wall of my bed. Countless times throughout my childhood in that room, the bookshelves would appear to be distorted in a number of different ways. Sometimes they would look like they were very tall and skinny. Sometimes they would look like they were very short and fat. Other times it would look like they were melting like lava or candle wax. A few times they would appear in normal shape and size, but looked like they were made out of something else, other than what they were made out of. One time they looked like they were made out of cement. One time, they looked like they were made out of tree branches. Another time, it looked like they were made out of glass. And one time, they looked like they were made out of black coal or black obsidian. The first time I saw the bookshelves distort like this, I was about 6 years old, and I thought I was dreaming about it. So I would shut my eyes really hard and make it go away. The second time it happened, I took my fingers and pried open my eyes as wide as I could to make sure I was really seeing what I was seeing. The third time it happened, I pinched myself as hard as I could to make sure I wasn't dreaming. I pinched myself so hard it left a bruise. After proving to myself that I wasn't dreaming, I told my mom what was going on and what I was seeing and showed her the bruise on my forearm. Each time it happened, I would pinch myself on the arm or my leg to assure my brain that what I was seeing was real, and each time tell my mom that it happened again and show her the bruise I made. This must have happened close to 20 times. One night, the shelves appeared to be melting and on fire. There was no heat coming from the fire and nothing else in my room was melting or distorted. In the middle of the fire was a black circle that had never been there before. The black circle grew and grew, and in a very short amount of time, it became the size of a hula hoop, with flames all around it and the edges melting like wax. I could not see anything in the black circle, but I could hear voices. The voices are saying things like, "We must take her. Come with us. Step through the circle. The flames won't hurt you. You belong with us." They were soft, wispy voices, very airy, breathy voices, repeating these over and over, talking over each other, beckoning me, calling me to come to the black circle. I screamed as loud as I could because it was the only thing I could do. I was afraid to turn on the ceiling light. I was afraid to get off my bed and run, that I could somehow be grabbed and dragged into that circle. I was absolutely frozen with fear. My mom ran into my room and turned the light on. Instantly, the black circle and flames were gone, fully extinguished. The bookcase restored to normal. My mom asked me what made me scream, and I told her exactly what happened, what I saw, and what I heard. From that night on, I slept with that ceiling light on in that bedroom. I never wanted it dark in my room or even dim, where anything could cast shadows. At the time, we were practicing Roman Catholics, and she had our priest come bless our house. After that, I never experienced the bookshelves getting distorted again. When I got older, I asked my mom about those experiences with that. She said the priest basically did an exorcism on our house, and that she believes that had I gotten close to the circle, or actually listened to the voices, I would have or could have been demonically possessed. She said both her and our priest believed that what I saw was a portal to hell. From that day forward, I've always had a deep connection, a deep relationship with Jesus. I literally saw hell that night and knew that's not anything I want to be associated with or see ever again. Story 2, The Candlelight Tour. When I was 10 years old, we moved out of Portland into a city nearby. This city has an old military fort that is part of the area's rich history. The fort has daily tours, and I'm pretty sure there's been a field trip to the fort for every elementary school student within 20 miles. Every year in mid-autumn, the fort does a series of candlelight tours. The weather is still mild, not a lot of rain yet, and not too cold at that time of year. For the candlelight tour, Historical Society volunteers dress up in period outfits. They have tables set with time-specific pieces for dinners in the schoolhouse. They have people working in the blacksmith shop and the trade mercantile store. They have period military weapons on display and basically make the fort come to life, as if it was fully operating during that time in history. The volunteers that dress in the period clothing are like actors, where they cannot break character or their role within the community, and are extremely educated on the history of the fort, the time period, and what life was like for those living in the fort. Throughout the property, there are several buildings: a blacksmith shop, the fur trader's outpost, the infirmary, mercantile store, along with some military officers' residences and barracks. There is zero electricity used during the candlelight tour. When you come and buy your ticket, you're put with a group and then led by a tour guide who is also dressed in period clothing, carrying a lantern to light the way. But unlike the volunteers throughout the tour guides are not actors and are not in character. All throughout the buildings are lanterns and candles, so that as you walk through any part of the fort, you're stepping back in that time. When I was 13 years old, my mom and I went to our first candlelight tour at the fort. I've always liked history and learning about it, so I was excited to go. We walked through the gate, got our tickets, and waited for our tour guide to come get the group we were to be a part of. Since this was a living exhibit, they encouraged us not to talk or have outside conversations that would take away from the experience. I thought that was weird, but understood. Our tour guide was female and wore a period dress with a white smock apron. We had about 12 people in our group, and the first place we went on the tour was one of the houses that belonged to a military officer. The house had 2 stories and a wide porch all the way around the house. When we walked up the stairs to the front door, it brought us into a foyer hallway area, where we filed in one by one. The foyer hallway then opened up into a sitting room. There was a fire in the fireplace, some wingback chairs, a sofa, a chaise, and a couple of small tables. In one of the chairs sat an older gentleman, reading a book and smoking a pipe. I thought it was weird that he'd be smoking a pipe inside, as there was no smoking in the buildings. I whispered to my mom about the guy sitting in the chair, smoking the pipe, and why they would let him do that. She looked and leaned into me and whispered that the chair was empty. I deeply inhaled, like the information scared me, and realized I could smell the pipe. My grandpa had smoked a pipe, and it was a distinctive smell. The fact that I was looking right at this man, watching him smoke his pipe, but my mom couldn't see him, and I could smell his pipe, freaked me out completely. We were stopped in this room while the tour guide told us about the military officer that lived in the house, and also to wait for the group before us to leave the next room. He never looked up or looked at any of us. It was like we were ghosts to him. I sat there staring at him, not blinking, thinking if I did blink, he wouldn't be there, that he would disappear into thin air. As we moved from the sitting room to the kitchen, I never took my eyes off of him, and he never disappeared. Went upstairs to see the bedrooms, which were large, ornate, and luxurious for the time. With each stop during the tour, the guide would give history about the house, along with some interactions from the actors. The tour guide interacted with every actor, but never interacted with the man I saw in the sitting room. We left the officer's house and moved to another building, a house provided for aides, helpers, and servants to the officers. Again, we entered through a foyer hallway, but we bypassed the sitting room. We walked through it to get to a large dining hall, but it was roped off and there were no actors. Once we got to the large dining area, there was the biggest dining table I'd ever seen. It must have sat 20 people. The table was set with dishes, cups, saucers, and silverware. There was no food or drink on the table, as I'm sure it would not have been edible due to the length of time of the tours over the course of the evening. Our guide stopped to talk to the cook and the people in the kitchen who would have served the meals to the officers. They interacted and talked about the history of the building, the officers, and the roles of the people working in the building. Then something made a loud tink sound. I turned my head to see what it was. There was a man dressed in full military uniform sitting at the head of the table furthest away from where we were standing, and he had dropped his fork on the plate in front of him. I looked at my mom, who was still focused on the tour guide and the actors. I looked at the other people in our group who were also doing the same. I looked at the tour guide and the actors, who had not even noticed this man, nor heard or acknowledged the sound of the metal meeting the dish. Now, I started to freak out again. Am I the only one who can see him or the other man? Am I the only one who smelled the vanilla pipe tobacco? Am I the only one who heard this officer drop his fork on his plate? I seriously questioned whether or not I could finish this tour. I looked at my mom and raised my eyebrows, hoping to prompt her to ask me what was wrong. She took the cue and asked me. I whispered to her and asked if she heard the loud tink sound a minute ago. She said she didn't hear anything like that. So then I asked her if she saw anyone sitting at the other end of the large table. She slowly turned her head to look and study the area for a few seconds. Then she whispered to me that she didn't see anyone there now. I looked out of the corner of my eye so as not to make it obvious that I was trying to validate what I saw. Even out of my peripheral vision, I could still see him sitting there. It looked like he was eating a meal and taking sips out of a water or wine cup. Even though there was no food or drink available on the table, I stood a little closer to my mom so I would be comfortable. The tour guide finished their interaction with the actors, and in order to leave the dining area, we had to walk the length of the large table and exit through the door behind it, behind where this military officer was sitting at the end of the table. Our group starts to file past the table, and no one is noticing or acknowledging this man sitting at the table. Not one single person, not even our tour guide. I held my breath as we passed by the end of the table where he sat. He didn't acknowledge us either. He just focused on what he was doing, paying no attention to us. We moved on to the next building, the infirmary. The outside appearance of the building was actually very similar to the officer's house and the servant's house. I'm guessing it was so it didn't attract attention in the event of battle or war. But inside, there were less walls and bigger rooms. This is where hurt soldiers and residents would come if they needed medical attention. There were a couple of smaller rooms off the larger rooms. These were for the private appointments with the doctors, I suspect similar to an exam room of medical clinics today. We were walking through the largest of the rooms on the first floor that would have been the main hospital room and looked like it could hold about 10 hospital beds comfortably. We are listening to the tour guide explain about the infirmary, the history, the doctors, and some details about when it was used when the fort was active. As we were leaving that room, we passed by one of the small private rooms. Papers can be heard shuffling, footsteps on the wood floors, and glass medicine bottles tinkling, but there was no one there. When I looked in the room, I didn't see any papers or glass bottles physically moving, and there's no one in there, but you could definitely hear them from the threshold of the room as we walked by. We continued on through the rest of the tour. No one said anything about hearing or seeing the things I heard and saw. No one reacted to any of those things while they were happening. I've not been on another Candlelight tour since, but I have taken both of my children on field trips to the fort when they were in elementary school. The school field trips were during the day, and I did not experience anything during either of them. Story 3. The Closet Visitor. The house we live in currently is a typical, standard 1960s ranch-style house. In the hallway that leads to the bedrooms, we have a closet that we use for small storage and also houses our hot water heater. Inside the closet door is also a full-length mirror because it was the only place that made sense to put it where we could all use it. From the time our daughter was about 3 until just before she turned 7, she loved opening the closet door and looking at herself in the mirror. It was the only mirror in the house she could see herself in without having to be lifted up. We'd hear her talking to herself in the mirror, and we'd always try to hear what she was saying, but she'd be whispering, mumbling, or we couldn't understand what she was saying. She would spend as much as 15 to 20 minutes in front of the mirror at a time. It was usually once a day, but sometimes it was twice a day. When she was about 5 years old, we finally asked her what she was saying in the mirror. She told us she was talking to the little boy in the mirror. We asked her what kinds of things she was talking about with the little boy, because mirrors can be dangerous and used as portals or tools to enchant or possess people. She told us they talked about what toys they like to play with, what they like to eat, about their family, and things like that. Although I thought it was a little odd, I allowed it to continue, but only while one of us could be monitoring the interaction. Up to that point, it was pretty harmless stuff and nothing that would cause any red flags or concern. One day, shortly before our daughter turned 7, she was talking to the little boy in the mirror. She talked to the mirror for about 10 minutes and then closed the door. She had a very confused look on her face. I asked her what was wrong and why she had that look on her face. She explained that the boy in the mirror had said something really weird and that she didn't understand it. So I asked her what the boy had said to her. She said that he told her he was about 9 years old and lived in our house for only about 3 months and had to move to another house quickly. She said he told her that he knew her mom and she wanted to know if I knew him. I told her that I'd never talked to the boy in the mirror before and I didn't know his name. She told me his name was Carter. My jaw dropped wide open and I just about fell on the floor after hearing her tell me all these things. Like complete and total shock. The age he said he was, that he knew me, and what his name was. About 3 years before I was pregnant with our daughter, I had 3 very brutal miscarriages where I almost died from the last 2. I couldn't carry any of those pregnancies past the first trimester. My husband and I had already decided if the baby was a boy, his name would be Carter James. Based on the age she said he was and the things we knew, it lines up with my first miscarriage. I asked her if she wanted to keep talking to the boy in the mirror, and she said no. So I told her that she needed to tell him that. I gave her some suggestions on what to say to him to let him know that she couldn't talk to him anymore. She sat down on the couch and looked like she was mulling things over, trying to decide what she wanted to say. After about half an hour, she got up and opened the closet door. I sat in the living room waiting to hear what she was going to say. She was more or less whispering, and it kind of sounded like she was talking to herself, but I could just barely make out part of what she was telling him. Something about how she was sorry, but she didn't feel good talking to him anymore, and she didn't want him to be lonely, but that she wanted him to find good friends and had to say goodbye. It was very heartfelt and sincere, but also very mature. I was very proud of her. From that moment on, she did not talk to the boy in the mirror anymore. She never mentioned it or him, and it was almost like, in her mind, that it was so long ago she couldn't even really remember him. We hadn't talked about it, even thought about the little boy in the mirror, for about a year. Until one morning, it crept up on me, literally. Our current house is pretty dark inside at night, with only a small amount of light that gets past the front curtains from the street light outside at the corner of our front property. It's just enough light to distinguish where the furniture is, with different shades of dark. Our hardwood floors are medium light colored, so any piece of furniture or form can be seen without too much trouble. This particular morning, I had to get up early, and it was before the sun was up. I don't remember what I had to do that day that warranted an extra early morning, but my husband was already gone for work, as he often is at that time of morning. Our bedroom's at the end of the hall, and the closet is at the beginning of the hallway, with a bathroom in between. So I opened the bedroom door to go to the bathroom, and when I left the bedroom, I had to look up the hallway to get to the bathroom. As I stepped into the hallway and closed the bedroom door, I saw a small figure of a boy, crouched down against the wall directly next to the closet. He sat on the floor with his back against the wall, knees pulled to his chest and his arms wrapped around his knees, chin tucked and resting his forehead on his knees. It took me by surprise, and I stood there looking at him. I could feel the sadness he felt. I could feel the loneliness he felt. I spoke to him and told him I could see him. He lifted his head from his knees just enough to nod at me that he acknowledged me acknowledging him. I asked him if he was the little boy in the mirror that had been talking to my daughter. He lifted his head again and barely nodded. Then I asked if he was in fact Carter. He lifted his head and looked at me. "Yes, you know me, Mama." Tears streamed down my face. What I had suspected was true. I asked him why he was here. He told me he was lonely and that by talking to our daughter, he got to see a small part of what would have been his life, his family. By this time, I was sobbing, a complete hot mess of tears, snot and emotions, still staring at him best I could through the tears, trying to find my voice. I finally managed to get my brain working again and tell him how much we had already loved him, how devastated we were when he couldn't be here with us, and how much we missed him. I explained that he would be lonely if he found his way back home to God, to the light, and encouraged him to go back home so that he could be loved how he needed to be loved. He lifted his head, thanked me for giving him the words I spoke to him, and started to stand. He got up, turned toward the closet, and just faded into nothing. After that interaction, we never saw him or heard him again. I have never had an encounter like that before, and have yet to have one like that since. I think that him talking to our daughter through the mirror and him appearing that morning was a manifestation of some emotions that I perhaps hadn't fully dealt with, but were lingering. But I also think it was the healing and closure he needed, and I needed, so that neither of us were hurting anymore. Well, that's all for today. Those 3 stories came from Paige Stone's book, The Uninvited, a collection of true life, supernatural, and paranormal experiences. You can find Paige's books on Amazon, Kindle, BarnesandNoble.com, and wherever fine books are sold. So thanks for tuning in. Y'all stay safe out there and stay strange.